So with this podcast, I just wanted to offer some advice and guidance and maybe some inspiration for anybody who's maybe writing a novel for the first time, or even for a veteran writer who's struggling with their their current work in progress, and who need a little inspiration, guidance, writing tips. I want to talk about how I get a novel written in a very timely and efficient manner. I can usually get it done in about 2 months. And in this podcast, I'm going to show you how I do it. So first and foremost, what I like to do at the very beginning when I have an idea for a novel is I like to go out to the local pharmacy, whether it's Walmart, CVS, or what have you, Walgreens. And I like to get a notebook, one of those wired notebooks, college ruled, wide ruled, whatever your preference is. I like the wide ruled now because I'm getting a little older and my eyes are more sensitive, so I like the wide rules. You might like the college ruled. Doesn't matter. I know this is kind of irrelevant anyway. But yeah, whatever your preference is. And I like to get a nice pen too. That makes the writing process a little more pleasurable. I like those gel ink pens. And I like to go to the nearest cafe, whether it's a Starbucks or a mom and pop type place, whatever your pleasure is again. I like to order a nice large coffee, and I like to get a nice caffeine buzz going, get all wired. And basically what I do is I write every single idea and detail, whether it's theme related, character related, dialogue. I like to write it all down into that notebook that I just bought, that nice fresh notebook. And this could be entire pieces of dialogue that come to mind. It could be themes. It could be the structure, the plot structure, characters. When I was in college, we used to do these things called character trees for my screenwriting classes. And I don't do those anymore, but you can Google them and look them up. They are probably useful for some people. I don't find them very helpful for me now. I mean, I have my other ways of developing characters, so I don't use those anymore, but you can look them up if you want. They're called character trees. It's an exercise so that you can flesh out your characters and make them very organic and real. But anyway, yes, I get everything written into that notebook, and then I go home and I write an outline. And this outline doesn't have to be anything too formal. It can be very informal. You don't need the Roman numerals or anything fancy like that. And basically you just make it as detailed as possible. You want to get that plot structure down onto paper and pieces of dialogue. I mean, I make my outlines very detailed, so I get those entire pieces of dialogue down. If they come to me, I will write that dialogue down. So this could take a little while because you're making it very detailed, but the more detailed you make it, the easier it is going to be to start the novel writing process, because when you have a detailed game plan, it's so much easier to just sit down and start writing because you know what you have to write. If you don't have any sort of roadmap, you're going to be totally lost. You're not going to know what to write. You're going to be overwhelmed, and you're going to probably give up before you even start writing. So trust me, the more detailed you make that outline, the better. I actually like to take things a step further and write an entire screenplay for an outline. I mean, I like having the screenplay just to have a screenplay in and of itself, but it also functions as a very detailed outline as well. So I like to take things that step further. You may not write screenplays or know how to write screenplays, so that may not be your cup of tea, but I like to do that because that makes for a very, very extremely detailed outline, and then makes the novel writing process so much easier. So get that outline written, and then you'll be happy that you did it. So after I have an outline done, what I like to do is write the first 10 pages of my novel, and that should be your only goal at first. Write the first 10 pages. If you sit down and know that you have to write, 200 to 300 pages for a novel, you're going to feel extremely overwhelmed. You'll feel a lot less overwhelmed, however, if you just get it in your mind that you're going to write those first 10 pages. And basically what you're going to be doing when you write these 10 pages is it's like a trial period where you figure out whether your story is going to work, whether it's going to be worth your time to write this story as a novel. You're going to be working other issues out, like figuring out whether the story should be told in the first person or third person omniscient, the past tense, the present tense. And what you want to do is get the first 10 pages done, then go over them a few times, clean them up, make them look as good as possible. And 9 times out of 10, you're going to be very impressed with how those first 10 pages look. And you're going to feel a lot more confident in moving forward with the rest of your novel. So that should be your very first goal. Get those 10 pages done and figure out how you're going to tell your story, if your story is going to work. Once that is done, you want to come up with some sort of writing schedule. So when it comes to writing screenplays, I usually recommend people write 10 pages a day. That may seem a little too intense, especially when you're writing a novel. And I don't do that. I do about 5 pages a day. That's on average what I like to do for a novel writing schedule. Some people, depending on how busy your life is, you may only be able to do about 2 pages a day. Or if you're really busy during the week, you might prefer to do about 20 or maybe 25 pages on a weekend. Either way, if you either do 5 pages a day or 20 to 25 pages on a weekend, you can probably get a novel done within 2 months' time, because a novel is about 60 to 80,000 words. If you keep a writing schedule of about 5 pages a day, you can get that novel done pretty quickly, and it can be done in about 2 months. The reason why it's important to have this writing schedule is to keep that writing momentum going. If you are writing 1 page here and another page there, you're going to find that it just never gets done. The novel never gets done. If you stick to a schedule and you're disciplined enough to adhere to that schedule, you're going to find that you're going to get your novel done very quickly. It's very important to keep that writing momentum going, and a schedule is very helpful in keeping that momentum moving, because once you break that momentum, it's a lot easier to quit the whole novel writing process. So a schedule is key. Okay, so once you get moving with that writing schedule, this is an optional step. And what I did with my most recent novel is I stopped every 20 pages and I went over what I had written in those previous 20 pages. I mainly had to do this out of necessity because I had a bad wrist, and I had to give my wrist a break every once in a while to give it a rest, to let it heal a little bit. For some people, I would recommend doing this, because what you'll find when you stop every 20 pages and then go over what you've written is, when you have the concern that you're writing something terrible, going over it every 20 pages or so makes the writing better. So it kind of gives you the confidence to move on to the next 20 pages. So I would maybe recommend doing this. However, there is a caveat, because if you do stop every 20 pages, there is the risk that you'll break your writing momentum. And the last thing you want to do is break that momentum, because it becomes much, much easier. And I sound like a broken record here, but it becomes much easier to just quit when you break that momentum. So if stopping every 20 pages kills that momentum, you want to not do that. I would recommend just keep going then until you have a rough draft done. Don't stop. Don't look back. Don't go over anything, with the exception of those first 10 pages that I already talked about. But just keep going. Hey man, what are you doing? Oh, I'm digging a hole to China. Wouldn't you be better off spending your time maybe reading a book by Matt Burns? Did you know they're available on Amazon.com now? Some of them only cost about 99 cents. At most, you're only going to pay about $3. Maybe you'd want to spend your time reading one of those books instead of digging a hole to China. Oh, I didn't know that. Here, hold this shovel. I gotta go read a book by Matt Burns. Okay, so what's going to probably happen during the process of writing your novel is you're going to get to what I call a mid-novel crisis, and this happens around the midpoint of the novel writing of the novel. And what happens here is you basically start running out of steam, and you become exhausted, emotionally, physically, creatively exhausted. The temptation here is to stop and take a break. And a lot of people would probably say that that's a good idea to get away from it for a while. I, however, would strongly recommend against doing this because, again, I sound like a broken record. If you take a break now, you're going to break that writing momentum. And I would not do this. What you want to do instead is shift gears a bit. Instead of writing in as detailed a way as possible, I would shift into a very bare bones type mode. And that basically just means writing the extreme bare bones onto paper of your story. So this can be a very lazy way of writing, but the important thing is just to keep moving. You need to get those words down on paper. And if you write in this very bare bones type of way, which is basically just writing a skeletal structure of your story in your novel, once you get to the finish line, you can always go back and flesh everything out. And it actually is way easier to just go back later and flesh everything out after you've gotten all those bare bones down onto paper. So when you experience your mid-novel crisis, just shift into bare bones mode. And whatever you do, don't stop until you get to the end of your novel. Okay, so if everything has gone according to plan and you stuck to that writing schedule of at least 5 pages a day or, something like that, you'll probably get a rough draft of your novel done within about 2 to 3 months' time. And that's definitely the toughest part. Once you get that rough draft done, the tough part is really over. Now you just have to go back and flesh everything out. And the way I do that is I basically go chapter by chapter. I start with chapter 1. I go over it several times, over and over again, until it looks as perfect as possible at the moment. And then I move on to chapter 2, do the same thing, chapter 3, so on and so forth. And I just make everything look as perfect as possible. If you did have the mid-novel crisis, like I talked about before, and you started writing in bare bones mode halfway through the novel writing process, you may want to start this process of rewriting and fleshing everything out at that midpoint. Okay, so after everything is fleshed out, what I like to do is read everything over out loud. And that's probably the single most important piece of writing advice I ever got, to read my work aloud. It was a game changer. I can't believe I wasn't doing it before, but somebody said, oh no, you must read your work aloud, and they're right. You pick up on so many mistakes that way, typos, obviously that's the small stuff, but you smooth out your writing much, much more when you read it aloud. You get a sense of the rhythm of the writing, and so I would highly recommend it, read it aloud. Now, my Microsoft Word program has a read aloud feature, and that has the computer read the work aloud to you, but you can also read it to yourself. Ideally, you want to do both things, but reading your work aloud is essential. You will smooth out your writing so much more than you would ever imagine. I kind of like to use the Spinal Tap reference. If your writing is at a 10, reading your work aloud to yourself basically brings it up to an 11. It brings that amp up to an 11. So I would definitely recommend reading your work aloud. So that's basically it. That's how to get a novel done within a very timely and efficient manner. About 2 months' time. Sorry, I'm laughing because my dog has been barking and I've been trying to record this podcast and it's been very difficult. This is not a foolproof plan to get your novel done. You can take some of my advice, you can leave it, you can cherry pick this and that. But most importantly, you just want to keep moving with the novel writing process. The worst thing you can do, again, sound like a broken record, is break that writing momentum. And that's when you're going to get lazy. That's when you're probably going to possibly quit. You don't want that to happen. So you just want to keep moving, especially until that rough draft is complete. If you need to take a break, I would recommend not doing it until the rough draft is complete. But ideally, you probably don't want to take a break until you've done everything that I've said in this podcast. So basically everything from the very start of writing in that notebook, outlining, until you get that fleshed out draft done. Don't take a break until after all the fleshing out is done of the novel. Then you can re-energize and regroup and get a fresh perspective on your writing. That's when you want to take the break. But otherwise, you just want to keep moving, and no matter what you do, just don't stop. Thank you very much for listening. I hope this helps you in some way. Maybe it inspires you in some way. Maybe it gives you some sort of creative energy to work off of. I don't know. Somebody out there may find this useful. So thanks for listening to this very first episode of the Burnzo Cast. And make sure you tune in and stay tuned. And hopefully there's going to be more to come. Hey everyone, if you want to check out my writing, be sure to check out my blog, theburnzodiaries.com. And also check out my books at amazon.com. I have many novels there, including Johnny Cruise, Supermarket Zombies, Weird Monster, The Woman and the Dragon. And I also have many Kindle singles there and other books, including memoirs. So be sure to check out my blog, theburnzodiaries.com, and also my books at amazon.com.